Good evening and welcome to Africa's Vision Network. Africa's Vision Network features African cultural awareness, education, economic empowerment, religion, spirituality, and other issues focusing on the African world. I am Princess Ayo, your host for this show. We have an exciting program this evening because we have one of my dear friends, Omar, and some of you might have seen us co-hosts, and if I'm not here, you see Omar here, so we are interviewing our own this evening. And we're talking about the wonderful country of Niger, located in West Africa. And I think our program is appropriately titled, A Blessed African Connection. And you'll see why as Omar tells us about his wonderful adventures in this country of Niger. We're pleased to have you with us.
Thank you, Aya. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's going to be fun. We're going to have a great time. Omar, I'm going to talk about you first. I have to do this.
Sure.
Omar is a native Virginian from Newport News. One of the milestones of his life occurred in November 2000. I was there, and he and Sharon Alicia Johnson were married at Bethesda Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. One of the joys of his life, I know, is his lovely daughter, Imam, who recently graduated from St. John College High School in Washington, D.C. Omar has been employed by Howard University and is currently employed by the federal government. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Norfolk State University. I didn't know that, actually. Omar had a blessed African connection when he served 2 years with the Peace Corps in Niger, an experience he will forever cherish. Niger is a country located in West Africa. The mountains and the Sahara Desert cover most of northern Niger, while the south is savanna. The climate is hot and dry. French is the official language. However, people speak their own ethnic languages. Omar will tell us more about this country. Omar is committed to his church and helping his fellow mankind, especially people of African descent, which I'm sure you have noticed on this program. Welcome again to Africa's Vision Network.
Thank you, Aya. It's quite interesting to be on this other side.
Yes.
But this is a wonderful opportunity to talk about the Republic of Niger. Niger was an experience that I pray and hope that many young people will be able to perhaps go to Niger or at least go to Africa.
How long ago was this?
It was some time ago, but it seems like it was just yesterday.
Yeah.
I went over there in June 1979.
Wow. So this is down memory lane.
Down memory lane, but it's remarkable that it seems like it was just yesterday because it was a very emotional experience. I happened to have been in Atlanta, Georgia, and I saw this sign that said, Peace Corps, the toughest job you ever loved. And I said, well, let me go and see if maybe I would qualify.
Right.
And it just so happened at that time they needed more African Americans, and they needed African Americans who had a degree in business. They processed me so quick. I think I went there maybe in April, and I was in Niger in June.
Oh my goodness.
But it was an opportunity that that was, I think, quite frankly, destined by God. In the sense that I've always been curious about my roots, and to get a free, paid, expense 2-year opportunity to immerse yourself into the African culture was quite interesting.
Some people would kill for that. Yeah.
I was thrilled because I was also, while I was in Atlanta, I was writing a lot of papers. Writing papers trying to get Dr. King's birthday as a holiday. Trying to, at one time they were trying to come up with an individual to be on the dollar coin, and I was trying to promote that. So different things I was trying to promote, but I was promoting it under the name Omar. Okay. Which was a pen name at the time.
Where'd you get that from?
For some reason it was just developed one day, and from that point, but to my surprise, when I got to Niger, there were all these Omars.
No.
Yes. And that within itself was just very astonishing to me.
What does it mean in Niger?
Well, it supposedly means someone that's godly. And but ironically, see, I didn't pick the name up from being in Niger. Like I said, I had it before I got there, but I just thought that, but God always guides us.
Sure.
And there was a reason for that.
Absolutely.
But the Nigerian people were, they were beautiful to be among. As you mentioned, there's so many different groups. You have your Hausa people, you have your Fulanis, your Jerma and your Tuaregs. You had them from light complexion to dark complexion. Some people asked me, they thought maybe I was a Fulani. Many of them knew I was something different, but they didn't know what.
Right.
One of the questions that they asked me quite often was whether or not my mother was white. And I thought that was quite fascinating. The president at the time was President Kunche, and he had come into office by way of a coup, and it was not a bloodless coup. That was an interesting story for me because I would have people over at my house, and they would share a little bit of information about the coup, but they would always whisper because it was something that they were not supposed to talk about. And for the members of our audience who may not know what a coup is, this is where usually the power is taken over, and when it's not a bloodless coup, that means that there were some people who had to die.
Right.
The predominant religion in Niger was of course, most of them were Muslims.
Okay.
Where I lived, as a matter of fact, I lived with what they call a marabout, who was a Muslim priest.
A marabout?
Right. And he was what they call part of the Jerma tribe, ethnic group.
Okay.
And he had 2 wives. And I lived within his compound. But it was fascinating to see how those 2 women got along like sisters. Of course, he was a very kind gentleman. And being back in America, it kind of brings up an interesting perspective on
marriage. And I'm often asked questions about that when I go to tell stories. And does it have anything, did you find, to do with sex? Did it mean he likes having sex more, or it has not? What did it have to do with him having 2 wives?
Well, that's an interesting question when you ask about sex, because I think sex can be kind of busy wherever you might go, and I can tell you that sex was appreciated in Niger.
We lost the camera crew. They all.
But I think in this case, this gentleman was so kind. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of him. He carried him. He was a very handsome man. He was probably about 6 feet tall, a very golden brown color, and the men wore eyeliner.
Okay. All the time?
Not all the time, but usually, like if they're going to go and maybe if they're going to pray, or if they're going to a funeral. But he was so regal and so royal. I don't believe it was just sex with him, because keep in mind, this particular town was a town called Say, spelled S-A-Y. Very small. I can't remember the number of people, but it was a very small town.
What did they do? Were they farmers or?
Well, yes, they had, they were very resourceful. They didn't have a lot, but they worked with what they had. You had some farmers, but I can tell you, farming in Niger was far different from farming in America. Number one, the rainfall was a challenge when I was there. So, you know, when the rainfall was very low, the crops were very low. But they were creative. As you know, too, the Niger River ran along the side of the city that I was in, Sai. So they were creative enough where they could, I call it a trench, but they had something set up where the river water was being used to water their crops. But it wasn't easy, because they had to stand in the water, and they were literally using buckets, just
like
kind of
irrigation.
Like irrigation, right. And one of the challenges that they faced in terms of a health challenge when they were standing in the water, it was something I believe it was called schistosomiasis, and it was a little worm that would enter into their feet, and so that created a problem. Matter of fact, as a Peace Corps volunteer, what I tried to create was what I called a crank and pull bucket system.
Okay.
And basically it was on a stand, the bucket would be lowered in the water, and they would crank it and turn it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get a patent or anything. I'd probably be pretty wealthy now, but it was something to kind of keep them out of the water. And I was just trying to be creative to help them out. But at this point, I will say this too, I learned probably more from them than they learned from me.
Where did you get the name Ashaka?
Well, you're going to get an early preview of what's behind Ashaka, because I hope one day to write a book called My Name Ain't My Name. But as I said, being in Africa and seeing so many people that look like relatives, as I told you, it can get kind of emotional, because to me there was really a connection. But maybe 3/4 of the way through my experience.
And you were there for 2 years.
Right. I knew that that something was going to have to change with my name. And ironically, the name I had before was the name of a very popular actor, which is one reason why I didn't care for it that much, because I always stepped to my own drum beat, and I didn't want to step in the shadow of somebody else's name. But quite frankly, I was at the office one day playing around with different names. And the name that I had before, it meant that when I was anywhere, usually I'd be called last because of the alphabet. And I had names like Ashanti, Shaka.
So you could come up front.
Yeah. Well, I had all kinds of names. I was playing with different names, and I actually like Shaka. But previously, my last name began with a T, and I said, well,
not going to go back there.
But then I decided to put an A in front of it. And I said, Omar Ashaka.
Okay.
I said, this is it. And plus, I'll be in front of the line.
Well, yes, you will.
With an A.
Yes.
But it was more to it than just getting to that point. I mean, one thing about being a Peace Corps volunteer, and my job over there, I was working with the agriculture co-ops, trying to teach basic accounting to the people who worked in the agriculture co-ops. And also what I tried to do is motivate the Nigerians who were in the remote areas. Because this co-op, they had branches in various parts of the country. Most of the young people wanted to be in the capital city, which was Niamey, because you had your stores like maybe a Safeway or something. You could get ice cream, could get everything. You had your theaters, you had your nightclub. It was very challenging for those young people to be in those very remote areas because there just wasn't a lot there. But I tried to motivate them to say that this undeveloped area too can be one day developed. So in between not working, there was a lot of free time, and I had an opportunity to do a lot of writing. And one of the poems I wrote, and again, unfortunately I don't have it with me, but it was a poem called Troubled Man with a Smile. And I wrote that because everybody thinks that even though there's poverty in Africa, that everybody is sad and just giving up on life. But when I was in my bed sleeping at night, and we would sleep outside, I would hear the laughter. I would see the children playing. And the children had what they called, I call it a stick wheel. It was the rim and the stick. But they loved it. And once again, the creativity was just awesome in terms of how people made the best of what they had.
What were the people like?
I found the people to be very kind. I don't know if that was because I was receptive and I didn't prejudge, but I was treated like a celebrity. But I found them to be hardworking, and believe me, the little town that I was in, it was a tough life. I saw the women walking maybe a 20-minute walk, 25-minute walk to the river to get water to wash with, to cook with. I saw the women using the big stick pounding the millet. Many of them had what I call almost like a double thumb because of callus. But they did it with a smile, and that's why I've learned to appreciate the simple things, because I knew that my time over there was temporary, but I knew that those people would be there for a lifetime. But they were proud people, and generous. I mean, they would invite me to eat. They always wanted to know about America, especially the students. And a lot of them wanted to know about the African American in particular, because they didn't see a lot of African Americans over there.
Of course. And we have pictures that the audience, can see behind us, and maybe we can take a closer look at them, and people can get a better feel of what the people were like, and you can tell us something about what it was. First, show us the map so we can see where it is in relation to, and there's my country, of course,
sure,
Nigeria.
And this is Niger, and Niger is like, so that would be north of Nigeria.
Okay.
And you had Chad. At the time I was there, Chad was going through quite a bit. And then you have Libya here, Algeria, and Mali. I lived in a section called Difa, which is right here, for about a year.
Right on the edge.
And then and let me just talk about an experience I had at Difa. I had an opportunity to visit Nigeria. And there was a vendor selling various medication. But the medication was in English. And unfortunately, a lot of Nigerians were going to buy the medication, but they didn't speak English. For example, they would buy something. There was a case where they would buy something and they thought that it was something they were supposed to drink, but it was supposed to be external as well. So that was interesting to see that. Another, of course, the capital city is Niamey here, and again, Niamey you can find just about anything. The stores, the clubs, the fancy cars.
Do they have skyscrapers?
They did. They did have some
Bridges,
skyscrapers.
highways?
They have a bridge in Niamey called the John F. Kennedy Bridge.
Oh, for goodness sake.
John F. Kennedy, as we all know, his brother-in-law, Sergeant Schreiber, was also involved with the Peace Corps.
Yes, of course.
But the Nigerians really appreciated John F. Kennedy, so they had a bridge named after him. The little town I lived in was called Sai, which is down here, and a very small town. And I used to go to Sai from Niamey on my little moped.
Oh, goodness.
And when I would get to to Niamey, I'd be a little dust ball. Because it was just so dusty. Plus, it wasn't the most comfortable ride, but it got me there. This is
there you are.
Yeah,
with a lot of hair.
Yeah, I didn't want to shave over there because it was so warm. But this was a gentleman here. I mean, again, they treated me like I was a king, and I really appreciated them. This was a family that I worked with. This gentleman was actually my boss. This was in Difa. This was his family. Very proud man. And be honest with you, some were not as receptive to Peace Corps volunteers because he may have felt at times, well, what are you really offering?
Right.
Okay. But
was he afraid for his job, or?
Well, sometimes we all, as proud people, we don't want people to look at us as though we can't do this or we can't do that.
Or something.
Right. This gentleman here is what they called a functionaire. He was like a mayor of a city. And one thing I remember about him, even though it's been 20 years, he smoked continuously. Yes. This is a gentleman here. It's called the Fulani.
Okay.
The Fulanis would probably be, if you had a Playboy magazine in Niger, Fulanis would probably fall in that category because they were considered to be very handsome. What was really intriguing about them, they literally had perfect teeth because what gave them wealth was they owned cows. They were like nomads. Okay. But I was amazed at
because of the milk.
The milk, and they used something like a little piece of wood, had a little
stick.
Yeah, and they would constantly work with their teeth. And this is another Fulani gentleman.
Okay. And did they always wear this makeup?
Most of the time, but I think this may have been a special occasion. For example, the women would choose, the men would line up, and the women would pick their husband. Okay. But one of the things that they had to go through, they would get this long stick, and they would smack them across the chest. And these guys were pretty small, but they were strong. Right. And another interesting thing about them, just because we all think that Africans look all alike. Right. But we have them from dark complexion to light complexion. Even the texture of the hair. We had, up in Difa, you had a group of people called the Tuaregs. They were very light complexion people and straight hair. Now, this gentleman, as you can see, his hair was not straight, but it wasn't coarse to the extent where it didn't grow long. Right. And these are the Fulani women. Okay, so the women wore makeup too. Right, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up here, but they kind of knew that they were pretty women, and even in this picture you can kind of see that.
Of course.
We're this and we're that. Again, these are what they call Germa people.
Okay.
They have very beautiful eyes, very beautiful brown complexion. They love to take pictures. And someone would come and just, like this little young lady here would come, my door was always open, and she'd just sit in the door and stare at me because she didn't speak French and she spoke German. I spoke some of it, but I didn't speak a lot. But she would always just stare at me as though she was just amazed. But
yes. They are amazed.
Yeah.
Sound very much like Nigerian children. They will, when you go to the village, they'll follow you around and stare at you. I mean, that's just the way we are.
Yeah,
because you look different, even though you are black.
Right.
And I look different. Right. Even though I'm black and I was a Nigerian, because of my mother, my African-American blood, they would stare at me too.
That's right.
But I grew up with them staring at me, so I didn't think anything, I didn't notice until I was in high school. And a friend said, "How can you live like this?" And I said, "Like what? Everyone's staring at you." And I'm like, "Where?" I honestly did not notice that people were staring at me, because since I was 7, I guess they've been staring at me. But we do have that tendency to, really stare.
And I thought it was great, really. I thought it was cute, really. Now, the other thing, they knew that they thought I was an American, some of them, because they said, and I said, "How did you know that?" They said Americans walk very fast.
Fast, yes, you do.
So they had some idea. But again, this is just a picture. They usually would have the international, they'd have what I'd call the International Workers' Day. They had a parade. Okay. And not everybody would be a drummer either. You had to kind of go through a little special training for that.
So but what other instruments did they have? They had drums and...
Well, they had drums. You name it, they had it. But that's an interesting question. I remember one night I was just walking, and I heard something that sounded like B.B. King. But someone was playing an instrument like an electric guitar, and it really let me know where the root of blues came from. I mean, it was just amazing. It sounded just like B.B. King. And I followed the music, and someone was playing their version of a guitar. So it was very intriguing.
Now, they were colonized by the French?
Yes.
Did you see that affecting the lives of the people where you lived? Not the capital, I'm thinking.
Yes and no. When I was there, the people in the remote area didn't really get some of the benefits, I think, that the people in the capital city got. Obviously, they were trying to develop and pass some of that development on to the remote areas. The hospital was different. And I want to share one quick story with you about that. There was a young lady that came to me with her child, because the hospitals are not like the hospitals here. You know, they close the gates and you can't go in at a certain time. And this lady brought me her little baby, and I'll never forget, the baby didn't seem like it weighed much more than this pointer. And I knew the French doctor, so I just walked in and gave the baby to the French doctor. But if that baby is alive today, I would be surprised. So those were some of the things that you would see in the remote area. But again, creativity. I remember I would go to the market and buy peanut butter. It was in a tub, and you'd say, well, it's almost like you say, well, how much? She'd say, how much do you want? You say, give me 25-cent worth. So she'd get a big tablespoon and dip into the pan. She'd reach over and grab a brown paper bag, tear it off, and put it in there and wrap it up. And you know, you had to get a little used to, you get used to getting them in the jar. And of course, I said to myself, this is not going to taste like Jiffy or Peter Pan. But when I ate that peanut butter, I mean, I kept going back because it was so good. And that was the creative thing that was remarkable. These women in the market, and I don't know how, you know, of course they grew peanuts, but that was how they made a living. And there was one other item, the taffy candy. I remember, you know, in Atlantic City in particular, this gentleman, he was making this taffy candy. I mean, he had this looks like, kind of like a crude way of making it, but he offered me some, and I said, well, this is not going to taste like taffy in Atlantic City. Right. But once again, when I ate it, it was just delicious. And so even I had those challenges of prejudging some of the things, but it was remarkable to see the creativity.
Well, we have no time left, as usual. But just give us just a couple of seconds, some of the thoughts that you want to leave us with about this blessed connection that you have.
What I will say is, I hope that every individual, in particular African Americans, get a chance to go to some part of Africa and go not just snapping pictures, but really the food and try to connect with the people. I mean, there's so much rich history. I mean, because I'll tell you another time about Gorée Island where they kept the slaves in Senegal. But we all should be proud of where we're from. And I call it a blessed connection because it was only through the grace of God that I had that opportunity to go and see for myself. And no one can tell me any lies because there was a first-hand experience. And hopefully I was able to share something with the Nigerians that they may keep with them today, because clearly it's been 20 years. But it was like yesterday because it was...
They'll never forget you either, and we'll never forget you. And you certainly have shared with us today information that we'll keep, and I hope that people will listen to you and take a trip to someplace in Africa and connect. So thank you so much.
Okay. And thank you for having me
You're welcome,
present this.
I'm sure. I hope you'll come back. In fact, I know you're going to come back. And so we are so pleased that we were able to have this wonderful show with Omar Ashaka, and I hope you all enjoyed it. So until next time when we have another interesting show, join us on Africa's Vision Network.
Man, it's only that time.